Hello and welcome to another coaching story. Today we're going to be talking about how to start adopting a coaching stance. The idea behind those coaching stories is that I share something from my very personal perspective, usually some of my mistakes, but also and most importantly, my learnings on how I overcame those mistakes. So, if adopting a stance, a posture of being more coach like is something that you're interested, let's get started. A few years back, I started getting really interested in coaching, and that's how I made my journey through Agile coaching and solution focus. I do understand that really becoming a coach and even certifying as a coach is not on everybody's career path. But I am convinced that adopting a coaching stance, a posture of coaching people, is extremely helpful, even if you are a scrum master or a manager. It just has to do with how you interact with people and you interact with them in a way that you help them see for themselves and discover by themselves. So I am really convinced this is a very powerful posture stance to adopt. So I learned a lot through books and courses, of course, but a lot through books and posts and blogs. And one thing that I notice a lot is that in many of that material, you will hear or read things like, you should try and keep yourself curious for longer. That is a strange sentence to me. I get the point, but I'll be very honest. I personally don't recommend it said this way. Make yourself getting curious longer. The first mistake that I actually committed, and I would say we should stay away from, is curiosity. I would say, particularly, keep your curiosity at bay. And here is why. I define, if you are like me, if you're a natural curious person, a few things will happen. Uh, First, you might end up asking way too many questions, and in that way, you can end up overwhelming your coachee. You end up taking up too much space and really not leaving room for other thoughts to happen in your coachee's mind. And another problem with the keeping, being curious is that you can focus on the details. When you're curious about something, you tend to focus on minutia, and then you ask things that have more to do on the why part of things and the storytelling. And none of this is really relevant. As a coach, you really help your coachee, in fact, to remove all that noise. You're really helping them to focus at the core of what's really important. And curiosity just makes you question and ask questions about everything around the story, even things that don't necessarily matter so much. Last but not least, I would say if your empathy levels are high, you can get too involved. And that can generate all sorts of emotional problems, but it can also, like, a coach should not be too attached to the problem, to the circumstances brought by the coachee, because it's not your problem to solve. And because if you get too attached, you might end up being very leading and implying and making decisions for your coachee. So I would say we have to keep our curiosity at bay. Now, what have I learned then to not be too curious and become a better coach by not being curious? What I do now is two things. The first one, I call it playback. One of the powers that I see on playback is that you're literally saying back, almost like a mirror, to your coachee. And they will be surprised by the things that, wow, did I really say that? They will start recognizing things, they will start having breakthroughs that are actually part of something that they already said. So I think it's pretty powerful if you're really focused and listening, that you can then play back and let the coachee listen to themselves through you. The second idea for keeping the curiosity at bay is looking forward. I come from the world of problem solving, and most of the questions that I used to ask, they tended to be around the why things happen, and the reasons around things. And I've learned over time that no matter what happened, the best it really is usually to look forward, really, no matter the circumstances of events, you are always confronted with the what now, what's next, what to do then. So the questions that propel your coachee forward, that look into the future, look into the possibilities, usually are better questions to help unlock things, as opposed to questions that kind of like help you understand what happened. I'm not saying that the questions that help you to understand what happened, they are not valid, but they usually don't, not usually, but they don't necessarily have anything to do what you're going to do. So understanding what has happened doesn't necessarily connect to what you need to do next. So because of that, I really just try and I understand that this is challenging, but I really just try to, especially if you come from the realm of problem solving, you really just try and figure out the why things happen. But I would say give yourself silence and time to think when you're with your coachee in session, and then you're going to see that if you don't rush your questions, I guarantee that you'll find at least one forward facing type of question that will be very helpful for your coachee. Now, that second problem that I faced when I was starting to adopt to become the coach that I wanted to be in the beginning was telling, and telling. If, like me, you come from the world of consulting and advice giving, you know that you have been rewarded by your knowledge, by showing up with your knowledge, by intervening and solving for things. This is a non-issue for people who are and only are certified coaches. So when a client approaches them, a client is expecting actual serious professional coaching. But professions like Agile Coach or a Scrum Master, even though we do coaching, that is not be all and all of our careers. And many people don't seem to understand that what coaching is. So they will be asking you in a certain way to give advice, to tell them what to do. What is worse, however, is when you feel the need yourself to give that advice. So like I mentioned, I was really being, rewarded by all the knowledge that I have. So then being in a situation with my coachee and not being able to tell them what to do, tell them what I know, felt a little bit disempowering for me, until I understood the power of actually empowering the coachee. And when I understood what coaching really meant, which is the power resides on the other side, not with the coach, but with the coachee, and that the coach is just a generous helper, things started to getting better. And for me, for myself, I really had to start acknowledging that once you want to enter the coaching stance, you really are abandoning the knowledge worker, the agility enabler side of things, because you're really there in conversation, in connection with that person or with that team of individuals. So I will not claim that there's any easy way of getting there. It really is trial and error. It has a lot to do with you understanding yourself, understanding your thinking patterns. For me, it was all about a little bit understanding that I am not a problem solver as a coach. I am a potential enabler. Like I said in the other part of the story, I really come from this background of engineering and science and objectivity, and in that kind of world, you really have a lot of if this then that type of knowledge to give, but coaching is not the place for that. So finding your way to internalizing that, for me, that was the key to unlock the coach that I am now. And I feel that a lot of self-reflection is required to do that. So instead of telling more people what to do, here is what I do now. The first thing is that I write and I doodle. And I tell that to my coaches in advance, and I tell them for two reasons. One, so that they understand that I'm not distracted. It's much the opposite. I'm actually focusing on them, and that's how I focus on them. I do so not only because once I doodle, I literally see the journey of my coachee. That's what I draw. I draw their story. I draw whatever the coaching session seems to be unfolding. So it's very revealing, and that allows me to be fully present and to play back and etc. The second thing is that for me, at least, like I mentioned before, I felt a little bit disempowered or useless if I didn't give the advice. I felt like I needed to do something. So doodling and writing is doing something. So I look passive, but I'm actually fully in motion. So I can control that need to do things just by doing something, which in this case is doodling the story of my coachee. The second thing that I do is separating what a proper coaching session is from all the other activities that I'm required to do as an agile coach. So as an agile coach, I many times will facilitate sessions, and in those facilitating sessions, I might be see the opportunity to ask some powerful questions, which is something that you will borrow from the coaching world, but this is not a coaching setup. So when I have an opportunity to coach individuals or teams, when they literally come to me and say, hey, can you coach us through this? In those opportunities, I design with them the coaching contract, which basically is explaining why I refrain from giving advice, what is the power of mostly asking questions and listening. And honestly, I'll tell you, once people understand that, I never had any complaints, because everybody likes to be empowered. And when you explain that the coachee is in the driver's seat, they really just jump into it. Giving silence a try is probably the best tip for this, for telling less and listening more. But I would say silence, it's probably a number one tool for a coach. Mostly, in my experience, the reason is a lot of the things the coachee will say are being said, are being verbalized for the very first time at that moment with you. They might have thought about those things, they might have written, but speaking, conversing is a different thinking pattern. So it will be the very first time that those words are said out loud. And that in itself causes its very own impression that you want to let it sink, you want to let it marinate. So if you allow those extra seconds, you have a few things happening there. One, the coachee will have a few reactions to the understanding of what they just said. So they actually might need those seconds to process what they just verbalized. But if and only if, you waited 2-3 seconds, up to 5 maybe, maybe even up to 10, you decide, but you give some space and you see that the coachee is really not resuming the speech, then you give yourself permission to ask another question, that will open things considering what has been just said. But my tip is, once the coachee stops speaking, even if you have a question that you think fits, wait 2 to 3 seconds at least, maybe more, but no less than 2 to 3 seconds. That is usually enough for the coachee to resume talking. And you want that because it's all about the self-discovery, right? So if they don't use your questions, but get to some important understanding of the situation, that is just as powerful. And actually it is even much better because you just created that space and the coachee got there by themselves. So those are my tips. Those are the things that I've done to, number one, keep my curiosity at bay, and number two, to tell less, to listen more. So stop giving advice. Those are the things I did that helped me with those two, I wouldn't say issues, but they were like limiting factors of my coaching stance. And I hope they help you. I mean, they were definitely very effective for me. Even if you're not considering to become a coach, certified coach, professional coach, I would say if you're looking for adopting a coaching stance, those tips are rather useful. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to link down below a little sheet. I always do those tiny little bits and, I share them with my mentors and my coaches. And it's just to help. You're going to see it's very simple, but just to kind of illustrate what it's like to be operating on a mindset of someone who sees a problem versus someone who sees the solution, and what it's like to be telling more versus coaching more, because sometimes it can feel too mysterious, especially if you're in the beginning of your journey to adopting this coaching stance. So I hope you can use the sheet down below and leave a comment. Tell me, did it work? Did you think about other things to put in the document yourself? Are you going to use any of these tips? Let me know. I'd love to hear. I hope this video was useful for you, and thank you so much for watching. I'll stop right here and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.